Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our headline session of the day. My name's Daniel O'Connor. I'm the Vice President of Content Strategy at Rapid News Group. You may be wondering who the heck I am because you haven't seen me all day. I've been mainly moderating sessions over there, but because of my vague job title, I'm an able body for hire. Our next presentation on our headline speaker for the day is incredibly passionate about one of the biggest issues we face today, not just in medtech, but in general, and that's sustainability. A seminar will discuss the reasons for medtech to be serious about cutting emissions, the unique challenges that exist in trying to do this, potential unintended consequences, and a framework of actions, focus areas, and possibilities to move forward in our net zero journey. So please join me in welcoming to the stage, from Boston Scientific, Michelle Sullivan. The clicker is here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the head of public affairs at Boston Scientific in Europe. I'm also an accidental eco-warrior. About 2 years ago, NHS supply chain came to me and they said, "So, Michelle, what's Boston Scientific doing about sustainability?" And I said, "I have absolutely no idea. Let me go and find out." And I discovered that there was a team of engineers and boffins talking about things that I didn't know what they were talking about, using language that I didn't know what they were saying. And they were working on something called Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So today I'm going to take you through a little journey of what I've learned in those 2 years. Understand that 2 years ago I knew absolutely nothing. There's no such thing as a stupid question in this world. It's a very difficult topic, and hopefully you can all learn something from this and feel motivated to try and make a difference. So I always start with this picture of the globe. You can see a little fuzzy, lovely blue thing around it. That's why I chose this picture. That's the Earth's atmosphere. And what I discovered was that the Earth's atmosphere is 5 kilometers high. So, if you were to set off from the surface of the planet in your car, as if you were driving on an A road in the UK, you would break out of the world's atmosphere in 5 minutes. And so that 5 minutes worth of protection is what's stopping our planet heating up, and which is what we're filling up with our CO2 emissions through various greenhouse gases. So, here's the first thing I realized. Anyone who thinks you can have infinite growth from a finite environment is either a madman or an economist. And I once read this really interesting little thing, and it was called, "If Earth was a spaceship." And I started thinking about that concept, which is, okay, if Earth was a spaceship, if we were on the Starship Enterprise, how would we be behaving with our finite spaceship? And I realized, that's what we actually are. We're on our spaceship. And so this is it. So why is this a problem? Here's the first thing. So here's a graph that shows the emissions from fossil fuels. And you can see how very fast this has changed, and we've gone from a standing start in the 50s, really, to where we are now. And when you hear the IPCC being mentioned, and they say you've got to stop this rise within 3 years and halve it within 8, this is what they're talking about, right? And here's the sort of link with the temperature and carbon dioxide. So the more emissions created by fossil fuels, the higher our average temperature goes up. Now, 1.5 degrees, which is our goal, doesn't sound very much, but this is a sort of average. And this is globally. And what that means is, for example, the sea heats up much slower than the Earth. And so there are various parts of the world where you will have noticed there are really extreme temperatures that have never been seen before. We even had some in the UK last year where we had 2 days over 40 degrees centigrade, unheard of. And it was the day after that happened, it was 30 something by then, so much more bearable. And a guy came to visit me about my pension, because I'm that sort of age. And I talked to him about the 40-degree thing, and I said, so, what did you think about the 40-degree days? Oh, well, it didn't make a lot of difference to me. I said, really? I said, what did you do when it was 40 degrees? Oh, I stayed in the house. I shut the curtains. I didn't go out. So I said, so you've come to visit me today. This is your business, right? Would you have done that? No. So if that was 2 months of the year, would you be doing that for 2? No. So, we have to start to think about the things that are changing in our world all around it and how we might improve that situation and understand they will impact everybody. So I work for a med device company, and we're being asked to count our emissions and report our emissions by the NHS. And we're moving in a direction where they'll want to know the carbon footprint of everything that we do. And so I thought it was worth reflecting on the lessons of the past when things have changed dramatically. And so this is a Kodak camera, and Kodak had a sort of the view that, well, nobody's going to move away from our Kodak cameras until smartphones came along, and the business disappeared overnight. And these guys, they used to think they had it pretty good as well. And how many buggy manufacturers do you think went on to make cars? And we're sort of at this moment in time right now where we're in the next industrial revolution. It's called the Green Revolution, and everything's about to change, and it's about to change really fast. And so if companies like Boston Scientific and all of these companies that you have around here that do what they do, if they don't pivot and change fast enough, they'll find somebody from somewhere who's pivoted and changed fast enough to make the difference and be the person and the company and the device and the substance that people want to use. So what are we talking about here? Well, the basic principle is this. At the moment, we take things out of the ground and we make things from them and we use them and we dispose of them and pollute. And when you hear people talking about a linear economy, that's what that is. And this one's the circular economy that you hear people talking about. So where you take something out of the ground, but then you make something from it and you use it and you might reuse it and you might remake something from it, recycle it, reduce the amount that you're using of it. All of these things contribute to the circular economy. So that if Earth was a spaceship and we only had the stuff that's on it, we won't run out in future generations and we'll still have somewhere habitable to live. Now, I was a sales rep in 2000 and I was working in Glasgow operating theatres selling equipment for what was called Tyco at the time, which is now Medtronic, moved through the phase of Covidian. And I remember in 2000 walking into Glasgow Royal operating theatres, and the theatre sister in charge of the busiest theatres in Britain at the time said to me, Michelle, we're going to have to move away from reusable to all of your disposable products because of mad cow disease. We can't guarantee sterility. We can't get rid of the prion proteins. I can't have someone coming in here and being operated on with those reusable instruments and worrying about me giving mad cow disease to someone else. And it changed really quick, like overnight almost. Boom. And that's how all of this single-use stuff started in the UK. And the things that we do and the way that we operate as companies is because of the individual patient and the safety of the individual patient, not passing on infection to the individual patient, guaranteeing sterility for the individual patient, making sure that something is available at all times for the individual patient. But now we're moving into this world where, you know, we're on our spaceship and it's getting filled up of CO2 and we're running out of capacity and substances, and the temperature's going up and things are going wrong. So we're going to have to start rethinking this whole principle. So we've got some things to consider when we're looking at this recycling, reuse, remake, reduce concept. So this lady had a breast cancer operation, and she asked the theatre staff in the Netherlands to keep all of her stuff that was used in the breast cancer operation so that she could make a piece of artwork from it, because she was an artist and she was a nurse. And this gives you some concept of what we're up against when we're thinking about moving to net zero healthcare, and how very difficult this will be to shift from what this looks like to that circular economy. But what we are seeing is our customers, our healthcare systems, and our hospitals starting to want to do that in quite a meaningful way. But what we've got to consider is we don't make bananas or grow them, or washing machines, or clothes, or even build houses. We make medical devices that are used to save people's lives, that are used within a patient pathway, that can have a good or a bad outcome, that can make a difference in terms of how long that patient is treated for, how long they have to stay, how many times they have to come backwards and forwards from hospital, whether they need to have another operation to cure their problem. And all of this makes things very difficult when you're trying to understand where to look at the emissions. Where does it start? Where does it finish? What is a life cycle assessment? Is it from the moment the patient goes to the GP to the minute they die? Because that's really the only way you can count whether your thing is the minimum emissions compared to the other thing. So here's some things that are facts that come from the NHS own data to consider when we're thinking about what we're doing and changing what we're doing and how we're doing it. Because at the time they did this piece of research, every hour or so of hospital operating time was 32 kilograms of CO2. So if I look at one of our devices where we measured the CO2 in it, it was 3.2 kilograms. So if we're going to add half an hour of surgery at the end of our change of device, right, well, we could use 5 of those other devices, couldn't we, for the half an hour of surgery? So it's not always intuitive what to do. Every night that a patient stays in hospital is between 3 and 13 kilograms of waste. In the US, every night you stay in hospital is 13 kilograms of waste. This here is the UK setting. It depends on your level of acuity. And on average, the patients going to and from the NHS hospitals are 18 kilograms of emissions for them to go to and from. Did you know that up to 5% of all traffic on the roads is because of the activity of the NHS? It's amazing, isn't it? I call this topic the world's biggest onion, because you think you've got it sussed, you think you know what you're going to do next, you think you know how to package up your stuff and describe why you're using it from a perspective of CO2 emissions, and you peel back another layer and it makes you cry, and it's never ending, right? Here are some of the things that we have to think about with the world's biggest onion. There is regulation and legislation. We are drowning in it. We have to follow it. We cannot just magic up some packaging made of something else with some different labeling, without an IFU in it, make our product from a different plastic that's mostly recycled. These things are legislated for, and at this point in time, we can't do things about them that we want to do. You know, up to 30% of the weight of what you're shipping around the world is an instruction for use right now, because Europe insists on paper instructions for use. And when the vote was last taken, somebody said, we're not going to pass it because that's just medical device companies trying to save money. I mean, what to do, right? So we're in the middle of another round of lobbying on this, because 30% weight reduction is 30% less energy of everything you're shipping around the world. And as we know, you know, these things get opened in the hospital and they go straight in the bin. And yet we have to have them in case someone wants to read them and know how to use the device they've just opened. Slightly worrying concept, but we won't get into that. In America, you can have digital instructions for use as a point in question. We can't just make our packaging out of recycled content. And by the way, when you start looking into recycling and building packaging in different ways, there's real limiting factors in terms of supply, in terms of the ability to do that. When we wanted to do some recycling of some of our products, the recycling companies, they weren't interested because their capacity was such that they wanted to use huge companies with massive amounts of things that they could recycle, not a few devices that have come out of an operating theatre in Germany, right? Carbon counting and life cycle analysis. So at the moment on the NHS roadmap, by 2027-28, they're going to ask us for some form of carbon counting and life cycle analysis. They have actually mapped all of our devices as suppliers in terms of carbon. They've done it based on spend and category. Apparently, Boston Scientific is number 8 in the carbon emissions of the NHS because of what we make, what it's made of, where it comes from. We make pacemakers, we make implantable cardiac defibrillators. You know, if we want to recycle those, we take them from someone who's died. These are all things that are happening, right, in the real world, and we're going, okay, we'd like to do some more here, what are we going to do? Where do you start your life cycle analysis from? Where do you end it? Will everybody start and end it at the same time? Because otherwise, how do you compare them? We've just heard that an hour of operating time is 32 kilograms. A night in hospitals, between 3 and 13 kilograms of waste. If you make your patient come backwards and forwards 20 times to do your procedure, that's 18 times 20. I can't do that in my head, sorry. Not when I'm stood here talking. And then we've got to make sure that it's safe, it's efficacious, we don't do anything where we get sued, and the patient outcome is as good as it ever was. So what does a company like Boston Scientific or any of your companies or any company in the world have to do to achieve net zero? These are the mysterious magical terms that I heard talked about in the engineering meeting, scope 1 and 2 emissions, and we're well on track to carbon neutrality, and we're going to go for net zero, and that's our scope 3. So I'm going to try and demystify this a bit for you. So these are all terms that are from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. They were designed to mean that you didn't count things twice. So that when you counted your emissions, you were counting them in a sort of organized fashion. All the stuff that you see on the left-hand side are the things that we're in control of as a company that we can do something about. And the things on the right are the things that we will rely on other people to do something about, and they will have to reduce their emissions in order for us to reduce our emissions. So, as Boston Scientific, we contribute as the 8th biggest contributor, apparently, to 60% of the Scope 3 emissions from the NHS, of which med devices are 10%. So I think that makes us 0.8%. I don't know. But the point is, this is how it works, right? So in order for the NHS to reach net zero, we have to reduce our emissions because we are the bulk of their emissions. And for Boston Scientific to reduce their emissions, outside of the stuff that we've done with our manufacturing, with our distribution plants, with our renewable electricity, with our electrification of our fleet, right? Outside of all that, by the way, that's about 10%. Our other 90% is all of the companies, the 10,000 companies that we work with to supply us. And we have to get all of them to come on this journey with us. Or else, we cannot meet our net zero targets. We can meet our carbon neutrality targets because that means we stick some solar panels in our car park. We come up with carbon neutral clean rooms, all of this stuff, right? We make sure that all of our electricity that we're using is renewable electricity. And by next year, Boston Scientific will have 100% of its manufacturing and distribution sites powered by renewable electricity. But we're just on the start of the journey for Scope 3. And you can see the sorts of things that you have to start measuring for Scope 3. And some of those things the NHS asked us to measure and report on this year in order to do business with them. And from next year, if you want to do business with the NHS, everyone will have to report on those things with a carbon reduction plan. That is published on your website. That is board approved and visible for everyone to see. So, you know, we will have to start thinking about how do we reduce the emissions from our activities of everyone traveling around the world. I was really happy that I got to get on a train that came from this, 2 minutes from my house. And when I got here, the station was almost in this exhibition centre. Ideal, right? But, there's lots of places around the world where that's just not a possibility. I went to a conference in Barcelona. It was really difficult for me to do that by train and get back before 3 o'clock in the morning, which wasn't an option if I was working, right? So I hope that's given you a little bit of a leg up on the Scope 1, 2 and 3 mystery, because everyone goes, what the hell is that? So here's what Boston have done. I mentioned that we're aiming for carbon neutrality by 2030. By next year, 100% renewable electricity will be powering our manufacturing and distribution plants. We've signed up to science-based targets. That is a company that externally validates your submissions. You'll put on their website. Everyone can see that you've said you're going to do it, and they say whether what you've said you're going to do is going to do it. But actually, these things are not fully mapped out. Just the bones of the plan are mapped out. But this is as good as it gets in our device industry right now, okay? Here's what that looks like with carbon neutrality. We had a visit from the head of NHS supply chain to one of our Irish sites, and we showed him the new carbon neutral clean room and all of the renewable stuff, and he was like, well, that's all very well and good, Boston Scientific, but you manufacture in Malaysia, and that's coal-powered. He knew that, right? I mean, we were like, good grief. But luckily, we just invested in this whole, shebang in Malaysia, in Penang, with the new all-electric buildings. But this is the level of sophistication of our customer, of our health systems. And just because the NHS is the world's first health system to commit to net zero, that does not mean that there aren't another 56 health systems that are looking at that right now. Because there are, because I've seen them. So here's some final ponderings for you to think about how to tackle Scope 3. This graph on the right-hand side I thought was quite interesting when I think about how we all go about doing our business. And when I think about the fact that I heard the other day that GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, not sure if you're supposed to call them GlaxoSmithKline anymore, never mind. They have a personal carbon budget, all of their staff. They have a personal carbon budget. And somebody said, oh no, I can't come and visit you, I've used my carbon budget up, right? And so imagine a world where you say, I can do 5 UK to Europe flights, or 1 US to UK flight, and 3 other ones in Europe. And you're my customer, and so, you know, you're important enough that I will use one of my 5 flights that I've got this year to come and see you. And then after that, we will do things in a different way until we're ready to conclude the business. And if everybody's doing this and it becomes the new normal, then it starts to change things. Something else somebody said to me was, if I don't fly, there will be someone else, the plane's still going to go, right? But if 10% of you don't fly, then that's a plane they'll take off the roster. And so, you know, when we're thinking about the different things we can do, well, let's not fly around just because we fancy flying about and having a chat with someone. Let's do it for a real reason. Let's not do it because that's what we like to do and we like getting out of the house. If we're going to travel somewhere, let's try and get on the train. You know, every kilogram of CO2 that we're not emitting is a little moment in time that our children are going to have a better life. That's it, really. So, you know, you can recycle, you can eat a plant-based diet. I couldn't believe it when I saw this graph, that I could not take 3 UK to Europe flights and it was more impactful than me giving up my car. I couldn't believe it. And yet it is a fact. And, you know, if I'm flying to America, it's about 300 kilograms in economy. And if I'm in business, it's 1,500 kilograms. And if I'm in first class, it's 2,500 kilograms. And if I'm in my private jet, it's 26,500 kilograms. So maybe that's one of the first things that should go, right? I don't know. 71% of historic world emissions were created by 100 companies. And here we all are having to choose to not fly on a jet. But yet that is where we are. So my sort of message to you is, this isn't going away. This will be the next industrial revolution. It will only get bigger. It will be bigger than MDR. I'm telling you, you heard it here first. I said this to a regulatory conference, RAPS, they all nearly fainted. Whoops. So, what can you do? Become carbon literate. Understand this stuff that I've been talking to you about. You know, I knew nothing 2 years ago, so if I can do it, literally anybody can, trust me. Consider the environment with what you do. Understand you've got this finite bubble around you protecting the earth, and every single thing you do is filling that up. We haven't got much of it left. Look to other industries who are ahead of us, which is a lot of other industries. They've all had to do things before us. You know, quite a few med device companies are employing people from, you know, clothing, from, you know, different types of food, you know, all of these industries that have had to really look at this. We need to work together as a whole system to agree goals. We must consult to avoid unintended consequences and the onion making us cry. We need to act like it's actually an emergency and set some targets, because it is. And communicate all the decisions widely. And this is my final point, actually. You know, there's something called greenwashing, and we all know about greenwashing. But I'm personally more worried about green hushing, which is where companies like Boston Scientific and others don't want to talk about all of the stuff we're doing in case people pull it apart for being not perfect, or we haven't got it quite right, or we didn't meet the target exactly that we said we were going to do. And so what happens is, when we've got great initiatives, we keep them to ourselves until they're executed. And what that means is that everyone else can't learn from it and not make the mistakes that we made. And, you know, we have to change this culture and start to collaborate and expose. I chair the ABHI Sustainability Group, and Addy McGregor from ABHI sat in the front here. We're working a lot to try to get companies to start anonymously, telling everyone what they're doing, and we're going to create documents that expose that, because that way everyone can learn faster, and it's an emergency, so we need to learn fast. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope that some of you have learned something from this today and feel motivated, because we all have to make an effort at this point. Thanks very much. I can take some questions.
Got time for a couple of questions. Who's going to?
There's no stupid questions. You can ask anything stupid or difficult. If I don't know the answer, I will just tell you I don't know the answer. At the back.
I knew it would be Phil.
It would be at the back, yeah.
It would be Phil.
I only did that to make you walk. Yeah. Your scope 2 emissions, you said you're aiming for net zero. Is that because you're generating the electricity, or you're buying it from sources that purport to be generating green electricity?
Both of those things. Both
How
of those.
do you audit whether it is genuinely coming from a sustainable source?
There's quite a big, sophisticated framework about that, actually. That's almost the least of my worries.
But do you think that's, over time, going to be the cop-out that everyone uses? Because unless the generators switch to green, the demand for scope 2 reduction is just going to come from manufacturers saying, I want green energy.
Yes, well, I think one of the pictures that I didn't put up was of a massive, huge solar panel car park at one of our manufacturing facilities. So, this isn't all just from us trading renewables. This is from us generating our own electricity. I think there's a danger with all of it, right? There's a danger in absolutely everything that everybody's trying to do. And, when I look at the carbon sinks, and us trying to artificially manufacture carbon-sucking machines out, it's impossible. This is not the answer. The answer is not to do that. These things that I've described, they're the easiest things to do. They're the fastest things to do. They're the things that make the difference quickly. They're the things that we're in control of. And I think that you'll find that as time goes on, it will be more and more what we're generating ourselves for multiple reasons, because we want to stay in business. We want to have that electricity available to us, and that's the way that we guarantee that. So I hope that sort of answers your question. I think everyone's doing the best they can with it at the moment, and a lot of that looks like a mixture between solar panels and trading and buying renewables, just like we're trying to do at home, right? Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? If not,
that was quite a difficult question. So everything after that's going to be easy peasy, right?
any more? Oh, here's one.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question. You mentioned earlier that 60% of Boston Scientific emissions, 60% of...
The NHS's emissions are their scope 3.
Yep, 10% of which is medical devices. Just out of curiosity, what is the remaining 50%?
What is the medicines?
Other 50%.
Oh, other things like medicines or food or all of the things that supply the NHS.
Right.
It's anything that they use in order to run the NHS that are the goods and services that they buy in, whatever that might be.
Yep.
So whilst medical devices are quite carbon heavy, there's lots of other things that make up the bulk of the emissions, not medical devices actually, including medicines, food, all of the stuff that they buy in as part of the estate management.
Yep.
It's like a big, huge hotel, isn't it, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One more. We'll take one more question.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for such a great delivery on your presentation. Well, I found it very...
I saw you both giggling away.
Oh yeah, we have a little smirks to ourselves. 'Cause
Yes.
we wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying.
Thanks.
Going back to, you said that 90% of the carbon emissions that your company produces
Roughly
is by your
ish.
suppliers.
Yes.
Is this, as an observation, a
No.
deeper machination to forcing companies to onshore their supply chain?
Oh.
And if so, I find it very difficult for European companies to remain competitive if that's
Yeah.
the end goal.
Yeah. Okay, so no. I think about this like dominoes. You know where you knock a domino over and it goes down an amazing pattern and you're like, wow, that's great. They all knocked over from me knocking the first domino over. Right, when I think about this topic of scope 3, I think about it like that. So we maybe have 10,000 suppliers, right? And each one of those is going to have to work towards reducing its emissions. And we're going to and will have to do so in order to do business with us, because we're all in that game now, right? So all the big manufacturers, they're all going to require this. So all suppliers are going to have to do this. So one of the questions I sometimes get asked is, well, what's the point of us doing this when they're not doing anything in country X, right? But actually, country X will be supplying us, and company X will be supplying us, and it will be supplying somebody that cares about this. And so actually, this is like it's like the domino game where once one person asks and then the next person asks, then everyone's got to play. So do I think this will change where we get our suppliers from? Only if they won't reduce their emissions. It won't be about their geography. Yeah? Did that answer your question? No. Oh, have I misunderstood your question? Okay, so yeah, so if Asia's carbon neutral, they've still got to transport it. So here's one of the things that I'm seeing companies doing, which sort of matches what you're talking about. Instead of having 2 huge distribution hubs in the world, they're building more distribution hubs nearer to where they go, and they're building and they're shifting how they move stuff around the world. So you'll manufacture and sterilize close to each other. You'll then move it to your distribution hub, which will be nearer to your end customer, and you'll move it there slower, right? So you won't fly it anymore. You'll send it on a cargo ship, and you'll change how all of this works. So if a particular geography suddenly becomes, we manufacture in Costa Rica, right? Costa Rica is a paragon of virtue of carbon neutrality and net zero. I think they're net positive as a country, right? They've got everything sussed. So will that mean that we continue to manufacture there? Absolutely. Will it mean we shift our manufacturing to there? I don't know, right? I'm not in charge of that. But I think that what we will see are companies making decisions based on overall net emissions reductions, whatever that looks like, and the lowest hanging fruit will be the things that they can control most easily, which might be, for example, how fast they ship something around the world, right? And then where they choose to do things next to something else, so sterilize versus manufacture. Because when they all look at what they've done in the past, they haven't made these decisions based on the environment and emissions. They've made these decisions based on, oh, well, this company gave us a tax break and this lot, it's all different. So you've got to put these new spectacles on and think about it from that perspective. And that's what I believe companies like mine will do and are starting to do. I don't think it will move everything out of Europe. Europe are way ahead on this whole thing with asking for emissions reductions and caring about it. The Far East is good at having created a whole business opportunity from this. You know, I don't know what the percentages of electric car batteries that are manufactured in China, but it's most of them, right? They're totally set up for this. We're all asleep at the wheel here in the UK. So you're sort of asking me to be Mystic Meg, aren't you, and put my crystal ball on. And I'm not sure I am Mystic Meg. Yeah, it wasn't easier than the first question. The first question was easier. But thank you for your question. These are interesting things to discuss, and we should discuss them. Right. Thanks a lot, everybody.